Empathy is incredibly important during a crisis, and communicating with empathy will really make your organisation stand out in a crisis situation. But in order to communicate with empathy, you have to have empathy. And very often we see organisations coming at the crisis from the point of view of their own position, rather than thinking about the position or the viewpoint of the people who are most affected by the crisis. Broadly speaking, there are two types of empathy. Cognitive empathy, which means I understand what you feel. I don't feel it, but I understand it. And the second type of empathy is affective empathy, which means I feel what you feel. So if you cry, I might start crying too. And actually cognitive empathy is really what you want in a crisis, because you don't want your emotions to take over in a crisis situation. There's a brilliant framework for empathy which has been developed by Professor Teresa Wiseman at the University of Southampton and the Royal Marsden. She specialises in cancer care, and it's a framework that's been taken on as the kind of standard in nursing care. But it's really, really good framework to use for crisis communications as well, I think. So if you look at everything through the prism of these four things, then you'll do really well in a crisis. The first is to see the world as others do. Don't look at things from your own point of view, look at it from somebody else's. The second is to understand other people's feelings. If you understand how people feel, you'll be able to respond more effectively to it. The third, and possibly the most difficult, is to be non-judgmental. Don't judge people for how they're feeling. Just try and understand it from their point of view. And then finally, communicate that understanding. I often get asked about whether you can learn empathy, and I think you can, or certainly you can hone your skills at empathy. You maybe can't learn it from scratch, but you can certainly practice getting better at being empathetic. And there are a number of things you can do. The first is to practice radical listening. Now, what we mean by radical listening is really, really listening in the moment. So don't think about what you're going to say next when you're having a conversation, which is something that we're all guilty of at some point, but really be in the conversation. Don't judge somebody for their opinions and really listen to them. The second is to actively identify what somebody's feeling, not by what they say, but perhaps their tone of voice or their eye contact or their body language. Try and imagine what it is that they're really feeling beyond just the words that they're speaking to you. Be curious about people that you come into contact with. So that might be somebody you see walking on the street. Try and imagine what their life is like. Build a story about what you think they might be doing, where they're going. That will really help you see things as other people see them. And then finally, have a conversation with somebody that you wouldn't normally. And that can be very difficult, particularly for people in cities where people think perhaps you don't want to have a conversation with somebody you don't know. But actually try and have a chat with somebody. It might be somebody driving the bus that's taking you to work, or somebody in your local coffee shop. But just try and make a connection that you wouldn't normally make. This is all really good for your mental health too. It keeps you in the moment, it keeps you very aware of the world outside you. And I really encourage people to practice their empathy skills. It'll help you see the world differently, and it will really help you in a crisis situation.